Imagine that you're sitting across from someone you love, and the person says, "What do you feel like doing tonight?" And you know that every part of you is so mentally and emotionally exhausted that the only thing you want to do is sit on the couch in front of the TV with Netflix on. And yet you say to the person you love who says, "Well, how about if we have my family over?" And you smile and you say, "Sure, that's fine." And you tell yourself that you're going to be this way because you're going to be easygoing. You don't want to make a big deal. You don't want to be the difficult one. You don't want to cause an argument. You want to be the one who is never disappointing. And this situation, in and of itself, is not necessarily that big of a deal until you imagine that you repeat this same scenario or this same type of moment 100 times. So someone says, "Where should we go?" And you say, "Wherever you want to go." "Well, what do you think about this?" "I'm fine with it. It's okay, whatever you decide." "Do you feel upset? Are you upset by this?" And you say, "No, I'm fine. I'm okay." And then one day someone says, "What do you want from your life? What do you want from your relationships? What do you even want to do on your weekends? Where do you want to live in the future?" And you honestly don't have an answer. You do not know.
Hey, and welcome to Masks Off Inner Freedom for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. This is a podcast for those who are tired of holding it all together. I'm Kim Gross, your host, and if you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but still feel anxious, disconnected, or quietly burned out, you're in the right place. Here we talk about the patterns you don't even realize you're living inside of: self-abandonment, over-functioning, chasing approval, and mistaking productivity for your worth, and more. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to perform, perfect, and please to belong. Each week, we'll slow things down. We'll unpack the nervous system, the inner critic, and the subtle ways that you learned to disconnect from your true self so you can stop living from pressure and start living from presence. This is your space to take the masks off. So let's begin.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can disappear inside a relationship without even realizing it. In the month of August, I'm going to talk about how we tend to lose ourselves in relationships, how to recognize when we are self abandoning, why these patterns even feel necessary, or why we play out these patterns over and over. We're going to talk about how to reconnect with our feelings, with our needs, how to reconnect with our preferences, and ultimately our identity. And then how taking radical responsibility can help us to build healthier relationships. In last week's episode, I talked about becoming real and unfiltered. And I explored the freedom of being able to be your true self. But many of us discover that being our true selves, being our authentic true selves, becomes especially difficult when another person's love or approval feels at stake. You might feel like you're being your true self when you're all by yourself, but the moment that someone important is disappointed, feels distant, is irritated with us, or unhappy with us, that mask comes right back on. Relationships are often where our deepest patterns become visible because relationships can trigger or activate our need for belonging. And I just want to clarify that this is not just about romantic relationships. We don't lose ourselves in those relationships only. We can also lose ourselves in our relationships with our parents, our young adult children, our friends, our siblings, former teachers, co-workers, even in community settings. What does it actually mean to lose yourself in a relationship? Like, what do you mean I'm losing myself? Losing yourself means becoming so focused on maintaining the relationship and managing the other person, avoiding rejection that you disconnect from your own internal experience. So you stop asking, what do I feel? What do I think? What do I believe? What do I want? What do I need in this moment? What feels true for me? Where do I end and the other person begins? And instead, what you do is you focus outward and you start to think about or obsess about, are they upset with me? Is this person happy? How do I prevent or avoid conflict? Who do I need to be in this moment for them to like me? Are they upset? What can I do to make them feel better? How can I manage their emotional well being so that my emotional well being is okay? And I want to make an important distinction here. Compromising with another person is not the same thing as losing yourself. When we have healthy relationships, it requires us to have some flexibility, generosity, and consideration for other people. That's just healthy and that's normal. The issue is not that you occasionally put another person first. The issue is when putting yourself aside or putting yourself last on the list becomes your automatic. Compromise is a conscious choice, and self abandonment is often an unconscious survival pattern. So, what are some of the small ways in which we can disappear or lose ourselves? And I just want to share some relatable experiences that you may be able to identify yourself in. So, for example, you might say, I don't care when you really do care, just like I shared in that opening example. And you defer decisions to other people because you don't want to seem demanding. You are afraid that they might dislike you, they might not want to be friends anymore. Or maybe it just feels so uncomfortable to tolerate another person's discomfort with you. And maybe you have learned that your preferences, your needs are less important. You may even feel that you are unworthy of having needs at all. So, another way in which you can disappear or lose yourself is to say that you're fine when you have clearly been hurt by another. Maybe a person said something or did something that really upset you and hurt your feelings. And rather than coming across as being too sensitive or high maintenance or just too emotional, you say, I'm fine. And you sweep it under the rug. You might say to yourself, oh, they didn't really mean it. I understand where that came from, or it's not worth bringing it up. It's not worth starting a fight. So you just dismiss it and you ignore it. You might also change yourself depending on who's in the room. So you're in a situation and you're reading the energy of the people, you're scanning people's body language, and all of this is happening subconsciously, by the way. You may not even be aware of the fact that you are even scanning. And so as you're scanning, you may start to adjust your own thoughts, your own opinions. Maybe they're having a political conversation and you might be a little bit more conservative and you realize that, oh, wow, these people are more liberal. And I don't want to speak up and say what I truly think and what I truly feel because then they might attack me or they might judge me. Same can go for your opinions or beliefs around religion. And so you withhold those opinions, those beliefs. You may perhaps go to extensive lengths to make sure that your clothing looks a certain way, that your appearance is perfect, you have the right makeup on, you have the right shoes on in order to fit in with the people in the room. And maybe you even adjust the way that you communicate rather than being your true self where you're silly and maybe you swear a lot. Now all of a sudden you're just being prim and proper. So these are all ways in which you can disappear in relationships and you become super skilled at reading a room instead of really checking in and saying, am I being my true self? So here is another one. You take responsibility for other people's emotional states. And this was something that was very ingrained in me. It was so common for me to take responsibility when I was a little girl that it was my job that I had to make sure I made my mom happy or I had to be the one in the family that was always trying to make peace. I was trying to rescue everybody. I can remember at like the age of 9 or 10 wanting to get my entire family into therapy so that everybody would get along better. And so it was my job, my responsibility, even as a little girl, maybe even as young as 7, that it was my job to make sure everyone was happy, happy, happy. And that was a huge weight, responsibility, and burden that I carried for a majority of my life. And it's exhausting. It can be so, so exhausting. So, what else can happen? What else can it look like when you start to disappear or lose yourself in relationships? Well, you might abandon your routines and you might abandon other relationships. This might happen more so when you're starting a new relationship. You're super excited to be with this person. I'm talking more about a romantic relationship at this point, and you start spending a lot of time together. And it feels so good spending time with this person that you see each other every night, every weekend, whatever the case is. And now all of a sudden, because you're spending so much time with this new person, you don't go to the gym as often. you haven't seen your best friend in months and you used to be with your friends all the time, or you were committed to saving money for something and now you are spending money left, right, and center because you're going out all the time with this new person. So you have abandoned your routines. You may have abandoned some of your other relationships in order to stay connected to this new person. And you may give up on some of your health routines. You don't sleep as well. So you start sacrificing yourself. And it starts out so small, so subtle, little, just like a little thing here, a little thing there. Before you know it, every day you somehow are abandoning yourself and your routines. And it's not because somebody said to you necessarily, like, oh, you need to stop going to the gym or you need to stop seeing your friends because I want you to be with me. There are some relationships, some people that are like that in relationships, and they're usually very narcissistic. But I'm talking about general relationships here. You don't necessarily do this one because someone is explicitly demanding it from you that you abandon your routines or your relationships, but because this new relationship begins consuming more and more of your emotional energy. And then lastly, you become agreeable on the outside, but you're really resentful on the inside. And this is a super important sign because as you continue saying yes, you can start to feel increasingly exhausted, irritated, lonely, invisible, maybe even trapped or unappreciated. So, say, for example, again, if you're in a new relationship, or it could just be a relationship that you've had with a friend, it could be even your parents, and you feel like you are always being agreeable. And then you start to feel like, oh, I'm so irritated or I'm so exhausted. I'm drained. I don't have anything left in me. And you start to feel really resentful on the inside. Resentment is often a signal that you have been saying yes when some part of you really wanted to say no, and you just override. You override your body telling you, or the part of you that says, no, this is like not going to work for me right now in this moment. In my book, Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, I have a chapter that is called Inability to Say No. And I share many stories in the book of how difficult it was for me to say no to so many people, but especially my mom.
Before we keep going, I want to take a moment to share something really close to my heart. If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, wow, this feels familiar, the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the constant self pressure, I wrote a book just for you. It's called Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, and it's part memoir, part healing guide. I share my own journey of learning how to stop living in victimhood, take off the masks, and come home to myself, but not by fixing myself, by understanding my patterns with compassion. This isn't a book full of fluff or quick fixes. It's honest, it's grounding, and it's for anyone who's ready to live with more peace and freedom. You can find Free to Be on Amazon. And if the book resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave a review. Even a few words can really help others to find it.
It started at a very young age with my mom. And as an adult, I think I was in my early to mid 30s because my kids were already born. My mom would have a cookie exchange at Christmas time where she would invite my aunts and my cousins. And every time she would tell me the day that she was going to have the cookie exchange, I would dread it because I really did not want to go to the cookie exchange. And I would say yes, I would show up and I would feel miserable driving over there. And it's not because I didn't love and enjoy my cousins and my aunts, because I absolutely did. What I had the problem with was that I didn't feel like I had the option to say no. And I don't remember the exact reasons why I didn't want to go to the cookie exchange, but I just know that every year I really didn't. And I couldn't say no. I felt like I couldn't say no for a long time. And I felt resentful. I felt super resentful about having to go. And I was probably pretty irritated with my mom. Eventually, I did make the decision and I said, okay, I'm not going to go. Or one year I didn't go and then I would go. The whole point is that I knew in my body that I didn't want to go. And I said yes anyway because I didn't want to deal with disappointing my mom or feeling the guilt that she would put on me for saying no. And that's why I wasn't honest with her, because I was afraid that if I was honest and said, I really don't want to come to the cookie exchange, it was going to follow with a litany of guilt. So at the time, I thought that I was protecting my relationship with my mom by saying yes when I really wanted to say no. But looking back on it now, I can see that I was really just protecting myself from the discomfort of having to feel guilt or feel like I was being a bad daughter for not showing up to the cookie exchange. So, why do we lose ourselves anyway? Why does this happen? Like, why did I lose myself in that situation? And it's important to like go beneath the behavior and see what's underneath. I'm always saying that it's so important to go to the underneath. And I say this ad nauseum on this show, but I do believe that it's important to repeat this and to hone in on the point that very often we do what we do, we behave the way we behave, we play out these patterns, we wear the masks because we learned as children how to adapt. These are called adaptations, or more specifically, Gabor Mate calls these adaptations. As children, we depend on adults for both our emotional and physical safety. So we learned to observe what makes them happy, what will cause tension, what's going to cause them to be upset with us, what emotions are okay and what are not okay, which parts of us are being approved and loved, and which ones are not. So maybe we learn that if we were just quiet, then we would be rewarded, right? That's where that whole saying comes from, that children should be seen and not heard. What does that message say to us? Be quiet and you're good. You're supposed to be seen but not heard. Don't be loud. Don't make a ruckus. Just be nice and quiet. Be a good girl. So when connection feels conditional, and what do I mean by that? That if we behave a certain way, then we will have approval and love. That's conditional love. And when connections feel that way to us as children, we learn to become whoever the relationship requires. So again, when the connection feels conditional, when love feels conditional, then we learned to become whoever that person needs us to be. Another reason why we lose ourselves in relationships is because our nervous systems equate disagreement with another with danger. As adults, a small conflict may activate an old fear. What does that mean? Here we are now in an adult body, and just this small, simple little conflict may trigger or activate in us a very old wound, which could mean that if a person is angry with us, we might feel like, oh, I've done something very wrong or very bad. They're disappointed in me. Someone is disappointed in me, so I might lose their love. And the present day situation may be manageable, but our bodies, our nervous systems are reacting as if our belonging is at risk. Another reason why we lose ourselves is because we confuse being needed with being loved. We think if people need us, then they're going to love us more. And so that's why we become the helper, we become the peacemaker, the fixer, we become the one who is super competent, the one who is dependable, the one who's going to show up all the time, the one who comes across as being very strong, and the one who certainly has no needs and doesn't need anything. Being needed can provide a sense of importance to us or a sense of security, but it can also create relationships in which your value depends on what you provide or what you bring to the table rather than just who you are. Another reason why we might lose ourselves in relationships is because we believe that love must be earned. And the hidden belief behind this is that if I'm agreeable enough, if I say all the right things, I do all the right things, if I'm attractive enough, if I'm calm and I'm peaceful, if I'm not demanding, then they will choose me. I also write a story in my book, Free to Be, on how I used to feel that I had to hustle for my son's love when he was younger, when he was a teenager. It was a tough time for us just because he was a teenager, he was going through things. I didn't know as much then as I know now, and I was still in a place where my masks were pretty glued on. So I was often in this controlling, anxious, nervous, worried place. And I would project so much of my shit onto him. And then he would pull back, he would pull away. And then I would feel like, oh my gosh, he doesn't love me. And so then I would contort myself into a pretzel and hustle for his love. And this is where people pleasing and perfectionism becomes relationship strategies. You're not just merely trying to be a good person or be kind. You might even be trying to make the rejection impossible. But at the end of the day, if you are acting in those ways, you're just trying to earn love. And you just need to be yourself, your true self. And then finally, our good old friend, the inner controller. How does our inner controller play a part in this? And the way that she is involved here is she attempts to protect the relationship with whoever it is, whether it's your child, your parent, your spouse, coworker, whatever. She says, and I've been saying this throughout this episode, but I'll just repeat them here so you can really see what the inner controller does. She'll say, don't be too emotional. Don't ask for too much. Be the person that they want you to be and manage everything for everyone so that they don't pull away. The inner controller, she believes that if she can manage you and the other person absolutely perfectly, then connection is guaranteed. But the cost, what is the cost for this? The cost is that you become more dependent on their reactions than your own truth. Your inner controller tries to prevent abandonment by asking you to abandon yourself first. And that, my friends, is trauma. It's the relationship paradox. So we hide ourselves to preserve connection, but hiding ourselves actually prevents the connection that we really want. Another person might actually love this version of you that is constantly agreeable, always available whenever they need you. If you're never angry, never needy, always willing to tolerate anything pretty much, but you might still feel lonely because the real you is not participating in the relationship. There's this masked version of you that is showing up, not the real you. So you can be deeply loved by another person and still feel unseen if you're not allowing your true self to come forward. And this creates such a painful cycle because one, you fear rejection, then you hide yourself and you alter yourself. And the relationship feels on the surface emotionally shallow, it might feel unequal, and you feel unseen, resentful, and then you work harder to gain the closeness. And then eventually you just disappear even more. So, an example for me, when I can remember in a friendship of just being easygoing and accommodating for one of my friends, it was always like anytime we would get together for lunch, it was always where she wanted to go. And I always ended up driving, or it would be not only where she wanted to go, but I just remember it was she was making a majority of the decisions in terms of what we did and where we went. And I was just very easygoing, very agreeable. And even in terms of how long we talked on the phone or when we talked on the phone, it was really kind of always around her schedule. And I just remember feeling very resentful for always being so accommodating and so easygoing. And when I finally made a decision after being friends for 10 years to set a boundary, to speak up for myself and just say, like, I can't keep doing it like this, she actually blew up at me on the phone, hung up on me, and then has never spoken to me since. I was really hoping that she could understand what I truly needed and wanted when I finally spoke up. But because all of those years prior, I never allowed myself to fully express what I needed or what I wanted, that when I finally did after 10 years, it was kind of like, okay, who's this version of you? I don't know who this person is. And so we were never able to really mend that relationship because I was not being my true self. Let's talk about some signs that would show up if you are losing yourself. And I invite you to just listen or notice these rather than blaming yourself or making yourself wrong or bad if you can identify with these, if you identify with any of these. So you might be losing yourself when you're often saying that you don't care what happens, you constantly need reassurance before making decisions, you feel responsible for another person's mood. You hide how upset and hurt you are until you finally can't take it any longer. And then you explode, and your explosion may not necessarily match with the issue at hand. You may over apologize ad nauseum for something that you didn't even really do anything wrong. You might share an opinion about something and then somebody else says something different. You're like, oh yeah, no, that's what I think. That's what I think too. You may feel like you're afraid to spend time apart. You have to be constantly with this person. You may neglect other friends for this relationship, or you neglect your own interests. You constantly monitor your tone, you're monitoring your behavior, just really aware of what you're saying, how you're saying it. You might feel anxious when someone else is disappointed. You might feel exhausted from trying to keep this peace and trying to keep harmony all the time. And you ultimately may not trust your own intuition or your gut. Most likely, you don't trust yourself to make good decisions. So, one or two of these moments doesn't mean that you've lost yourself. If it just happens occasionally, we all tend to accommodate at times. The question is whether or not these behaviors happen so frequently that they become a pattern. And now all of a sudden, you're living a pattern and not a life. And you don't even realize that what's driving this is fear. So, what I want you to understand is that the very first step is not to confront people and blow up all your relationships. That is not what I'm advising here. And so, I just want you to understand, I'm just inviting you to just slow everything down. And before you speak your truth to someone else, you may just first want to start listening to it yourself. So, again, it's not about ending a relationship with another person. It's not about all of a sudden blaming them or becoming rigid. We can go from this place of being so easygoing to becoming overly rigid and refusing to compromise at all. And sometimes that happens when we're learning new ways. We can swing the pendulum from one extreme all the way over to the other extreme. And that's okay if you do that. But what I'm suggesting is how to find more of the middle ground. You can begin noticing the moments when you start leaving yourself. A simple pause when you hear yourself saying, it's fine, whatever you want to do. I don't care. It's not a big deal. I can handle it. Sure, you decide. I don't really know. You can pause and ask yourself, is this actually true? When you say whatever you want, it's fine, I don't care. Is that true? What are you truly feeling in the moment? What do you really want? What are you afraid will happen if you say your truth? Are you choosing to compromise, or are you actually being afraid? to be honest and to be real? And what would it look like to stay with yourself in that moment? Instead of automatically saying whatever you want, you could say, I know you were thinking about having Italian tonight, but I'm honestly tired and I would just rather stay home and cook on the grill. Would that work for you? Or you could say, I know you are wanting Italian. I'm open to a few other options, but I don't really want to go to that particular restaurant. Or give me a minute to think about what I actually do want. And these are not aggressive or selfish statements. They allow both people to exist in the relationship. So staying connected to yourself does not mean that you will always necessarily get your way. It just means that you remain present in the conversation. I've talked before about my 5-step power pathway, POWER, and the first step of that process is to recognize or become aware of your patterns. It's pattern awareness. And you cannot change that which you don't acknowledge. So if you aren't aware of how you show up and you can't see that you're losing yourself in these ways, you won't ever be able to do anything differently about it. So I encourage you to notice, become aware when you're being overly agreeable, when you stop sharing. Notice when your body becomes tight or tense. Notice when you start monitoring someone else's reactions. Notice when you're in a room full of people that you know and care about, and they're all talking and chatting with each other, and then you get lost in the room because you become quiet. You don't share. You don't say anything. And now you're with all these people, but you feel extremely lonely. Notice when you feel guilty for even having a need. If you are tired and you don't want to go out, but you know your partner is wanting to go out and you feel guilty because you're tired and need to rest, notice. And then if you choose to go anyway, even though you're really exhausted, and notice that override. I want to just be really clear that we do not start to heal or reclaim our true selves or our wholeness by demanding that everybody around us changes to accommodate the way we are. We return to our wholeness by learning how to stay connected to our true selves, even when another person is having some type of reaction. So I invite you to think of one relationship in your life where you struggle to stay with yourself and ask, who am I most afraid to disappoint? Is it your dad, your mom? Is it your children, your spouse? Maybe it's your boss. And what do I routinely hide from this person? What feelings do you minimize? And what do you say yes to when you know that your body is saying no? What are you afraid would happen if you were more honest with this person or anybody? What parts of yourself have you stopped expressing? And what is one small way that you can stay with yourself this week. For example, you could express a preference that you have. You could pause and take your time before answering someone's request. You can offer an opinion that might be controversial. You might even decline an invitation without giving 1,000 excuses. You might allow someone to be even disappointed with you. I just want to really point out that you do not lose yourself in relationships or shrink in relationships because you're weak. The reason that we disappear or lose ourselves is because some part of us learned that connection was safer when we adapted to what other people wanted and needed from us. And that part may believe that love requires us to be agreeable, to be useful, to be perfect. But here's the deal: real intimacy cannot grow when one person has to continually disappear. It can't, it just won't happen. And the other truth is that healing begins in small moments, one moment at a time. So the next time that someone asks you, what do you want or what do you think, you can pause before automatically saying, whatever you want. I don't care, whatever you want. Or the next time that you do feel hurt, you can notice the impulse to just say, I'm fine, and really tell the truth. Tell how you feel hurt and why. This is not about caring less about other people. You're actually learning that caring about someone else doesn't require that you leave yourself behind. The goal is not to choose yourself instead of the relationship. The goal is to finally bring yourself into the whole relationship.
As we wrap up today's episode, I just want to say thank you for being here and for taking this time for yourself. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast or leave a review. Even a quick star rating helps more people find this space and reminds the algorithms that these conversations matter. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, a takeaway, or something that came up while you were listening, leave a comment or send it in. Let's keep the conversation going. This podcast isn't meant to be a one-way street. It's meant to feel like a community. If you want to learn more about me, my work, or the ways we can go deeper together, you can visit my website. All the details are there. Until next time, take a breath, take the mask off, and be gentle with yourself. I'll see you soon.